Hello friends, welcome. Today we're going to start straight with the frontline updates, because what we've been seeing over the last few hours is not just another day of war, it's a very clear snapshot of how the fight is changing. Ukraine is pushing smartly, leaning on drones, infiltration and surgical strikes, while Russia tries to sustain its offensive with improvised reinforcements, logistics under fire and, in some cases, increasingly desperate decisions. We begin in the Huliaipole direction. There's a detail here that I think is crucial. Infiltration is not a tactic exclusive to one side. The situation in this area shows that Ukraine is also using infiltration with drone support. And this time there was an episode that makes it brutally clear. A Ukrainian soldier was spotted operating behind previously gained Russian positions, right where the Russians had already set up something like a bridgehead, or at least an attempt to hold ground near the river. And most strikingly, according to the video, that soldier ended up neutralizing 3 Russian soldiers who tried to regroup after an initial strike. The scene, as it's described, goes like this. The Russians had a position in a building. That point was hit by a heavy Baba Yaga type drone, those drones that carry munitions and can do real damage to fixed positions, but several Russian soldiers survived and ran to the nearest building looking for cover. What they didn't know was that this next building was already occupied by a Ukrainian. And here's what matters, because when many people hear a lone soldier, they picture abandonment, they picture madness. But that's not how this war works. Alone physically does not mean alone operationally. In these kinds of missions, infantry deliberately disperses so it doesn't become a perfect target for enemy drones, but at the same time it is backed up by its own drones that watch, mark movement, and give you the kind of advantage that decides an engagement in seconds. What makes this episode even harsher is the way it unfolded. The Russian soldiers entered one by one, not suspecting the building already had a defender. And that kind of mistake in a drone war is extremely costly. Because the old, "I'll move closer to see what's there," no longer exists without consequences. When you lack situational awareness and the other side has it, you end up walking into your own end. The Russians went in separately and were neutralized the same way, one after another. And this isn't just a shocking clip. It's a live tactical lesson. Today, control of micro-terrain, information, and angles can matter as much as the number of men you have. And here's another factor the video emphasizes, and I completely agree with it: the weather. The video looks recent. You can see the snow, and you can tell it's been a week of bad conditions. This changes everything. When there's snow, wind, low visibility, and storms, the drone's eye doesn't always operate with the same continuity. There are gaps, there are windows, and the armies that know how to exploit those windows can infiltrate, rotate, reposition, or strike where the enemy feels safe. Weather isn't just a nice background in this war, it's a weapon. Meteorology can let a patrol slip behind a line. It can prevent the enemy from spotting you in time. And it can give you the seconds you need to set an ambush. It's mentioned that this was carried out by the 225th Brigade, a unit that has already shown capability in other sectors and now appears here to halt the Russian offensive. And what's suggested is that Ukraine is in a counterattack. Yes, but not the kind of counterattack from 2 years ago, with big columns, frontal assaults, and convoys pushing forward as if the sky didn't exist. Today, the sky rules. Today, the drone rules. And from what we're seeing, Ukraine is trying to fight smart, drone first, then a precise strike, and infantry moving in only when the timing is favorable. Now, while Ukraine is doing this in Huliaipole, something else is made very clear. Russia is trying to compensate for its frontline problems by punishing the rear, logistics and routes. And here a factor appears that the narrator calls a game changer: glide bombs. The so-called gliding bombs. The point is simple. If Russia can launch these munitions frequently, it can flatten entire sectors, destroy defensive positions, and force withdrawals, not because the defender is cowardly, but because holding a point under that kind of hammering becomes unsustainable. This has had a real impact in several places. Because when districts are destroyed and routes are cut, bravery alone doesn't hold. The line defense breaks through physics, logistics, and exhaustion. This also connects to a weakness the video mentions. When defense in an area falls on territorial units with less combat experience, constant pressure hits harder. And note, this is not an insult. There are very strong territorial defense brigades. But generally, these formations include many newly mobilized troops, recently integrated with less training or less time in direct combat. And when you're hit by artillery, drones, glide bombs, and daily attacks, the difference between a seasoned brigade and a brigade with more newcomers becomes visible. That's the hard reality. Still, the video drops an important idea. Ukraine is reforming and recalibrating, and that connects to political news mentioned later. But before we go macro, let's return to the tactical layer. Because there's another clip from Huliaipole that reinforces the same picture. Artillery or support fire against Russian positions, suggesting Ukraine isn't only holding, it's trying to regain initiative, and this is where the tank topic appears. Many people said tanks are useless now. Tanks are dead. And yes, tanks suffer like never before in an environment saturated with FPVs and surveillance drones. But they keep showing up because, used correctly, they still matter. The difference is the method. It's no longer frontal push and advance. The pattern the narrator highlights is this. A tank appears alone, exposes itself for a few minutes, fires, changes position and disappears. Pop up, hit, withdraw. Minimize exposure time. Because today, a tank doesn't die when it's seen. It dies when it stays. So the real tactic is to move as if every extra second is a sentence dot in another video. You see a T-64 operating in coordination with a surveillance drone that adjusts and observes. This is crucial. It's not just the tank, it's the tank as part of a system. A drone sees the tree line, marks where the group is, gives corrections, and you strike with precision without lingering too long. The target was a position in a strip of vegetation, a typical tree line where infantry tries to hold. The tank hits, the position collapses, and then the tank pulls back. This is about as close as you get to a realistic application of armor in the drone era. Now we move to Pokrovsk. This sector, according to the narration, had been relatively calmer for a few days. But today, there are signs of Russian movement, reinforcements, and above all a pattern that repeats like a curse. Convoys that roll out, convoys that stop, convoys that become exposed, and convoys that end up annihilated by drones. The narrator says he didn't see an official update from his monitoring center. But he did have visual confirmation from Ukrainian drones showing columns of light vehicles, not necessarily tanks or BMPs, but low protection transport, old vehicles, pickups, adapted cars, things that look civilian or semi-military. And this matches what's been seen in other sectors. When the armored vehicle fleet is reduced through losses and wear, you start seeing more improvisation. And improvisation under constant surveillance is an invitation to disaster. In one of the described clips, a group of Russian soldiers was next to a vehicle with a couple of older units, and for some reason the convoy stops. And at that exact moment it becomes a perfect target. Because the basic rule of drone warfare is, if you stay static on a surveilled road, you're already dead. The only question is how long until the drone arrives. Ukraine sends FPVs, then drones that drop munitions, and the job is completed. And that detail matters. It's not a single strike, it's a chain. First FPVs to disrupt and finish key points, then drops to complete the kill or hunt scattered survivors. It's a system. So how does Ukraine sustain this? With constant surveillance. The narrator mentions Mavic-type drones with good zoom and strong battery life, launching one after another like a permanent camera over key roads. This is exactly what makes routes deadly. This is exactly. And on top of that, weather pushes Russians onto roads. When the ground is bad, off-road movement is slower, more visible and riskier. So they concentrate on roads. And when you concentrate on roads, you become predictable. And when you become predictable, The drone turns you into a statistic. There's also another twist inside this report. The narrator talks about a fake video and alleged deception carried out by Ukrainian intelligence, where a scene was staged to convince those who ordered and paid for an attack that the job had been done. It's a powerful story because it blends two things that dominate this war: propaganda and intelligence operations. In that version, an allegedly eliminated target appears in the footage. A vehicle is shown burning, and even interface details like a low battery icon are included to make it look like the drone flew a long distance. But it would be a staged setup, a decoy. And the real target, according to the narrator, was actually alive and later appeared in interviews, implying the clip was designed to close a payment and expose a chain. Now, it's important to say this responsibly. Stories like this require solid confirmation, because an enormous amount of manipulated material circulates in wartime. But as a narrative element, it reflects something real. Both sides use imagery as a weapon. And intelligence services work with decoys, constructed stories, and operations aimed at identifying networks, intermediaries, and money flows. If this deception was real, it isn't just a fake video, it's a trap to create confidence on the other side and then open the door for a counter-operation. We return to the front and something appears again that repeats with a mix of disbelief and outrage. Animals, horses, and the return of scenes that look like they belong to another century. In some clips, horses are seen in the area, used by Russian troops to move or carry supplies. And this doesn't look like symbolism. It looks like necessity. If you lose transport, if your logistics break, if your vehicles are being hunted, you end up using whatever you have. And that can include animals. It's an image that sparks rejection because it puts living beings into a battlefield they don't even understand. The narrator is frustrated by it and many people are too. In addition, there's mention of an attack that hit a zoo with injured animals transferred for veterinary care. Episodes like these carry enormous weight in perception because they become symbolic. It's not only war against soldiers, it's war that strikes daily life, the vulnerable, and things that have nothing to do with the front. That fuels anger, strengthens resistance morale, and also shapes international narratives. Then the report moves to the map, to the territorial layer. The changes over 24 hours are not described as massive, more like small advances and slow pressure towards certain objectives. And that's also part of the reality. Many people imagine offensives as huge arrows moving in days. But in this war, a street, a tree line, a small village can take weeks. That's why even small advances matter when they repeat day after day. However, while the map changes little, attacks on civilian infrastructure continue. The narrator mentions strikes on cities with casualties, damaged residential buildings, and especially the persistent sense of insecurity in places like Kyiv. That's what makes this war unbearable for the population. It's not just the front. It's the rear being hit almost daily. People stay because it's their home, because they don't want to leave, because they can't leave. And each day becomes a coin toss. And now we move to politics. Because the video also brings a block of internal news that, if true or confirmed, would be a significant shift. It discusses moves within the presidential office, with the possibility that Budanov could take a very high role close to the presidency instead of previous figures. Here it's best to treat it for what it is, reports and rumors that circulate and require official confirmation. But the narrator's argument is clear. Budanov would be a heavyweight figure, with connections respected by parts of Western services, and able to operate beyond pure intelligence, influencing political strategy. If that change happens, it would be a strong message to Russia and a signal to allies. There's also mention of a new defense minister, supposedly a figure linked to digital transformation and drone projects. If that becomes reality, the reading is obvious. Ukraine is betting on scaling drone production, digitizing management, increasing transparency, and making the drone the backbone of the force. And that fits with what we see at the front. The drone is not an accessory. It's the nervous system. On the technology side, there's an interesting detail. Russia may be applying infrared distortions or thermal tricks to complicate Ukrainian interceptors that rely on IR cameras. A case is described where an interceptor approaches a shade-type drone, and suddenly the signal is lost or tracking breaks due to thermal saturation. If this is real and becomes widespread, it's a problem, yes, but it's also part of the cycle, measure and countermeasure. Today, drones evolve faster than almost any other weapon, and what works today can become obsolete in weeks. The narrator mentions possible solutions like other detection systems, and the core idea is correct. The drone war is a constant, technological chase. Then the video opens to an international topic that has often been used in propaganda, a national questionnaire in Germany. Surveys about military readiness and debate over service. The question is raised whether Europe is preparing for war, and it contrasts the dilemma of democracies versus dictatorships. The narrator's take is, in a dictatorship, you can mobilize regardless of social cost. In a democracy, you have to convince, justify, explain why and where. And that's true. The will to fight isn't manufactured by law alone. It's built through perceived threat. In Ukraine, it was existential from day one. For other countries, that perception may take longer to form, and that's the risk. And to close the picture, what you see today, when you put it all together, is a war where the front is decided by information, drones, weather, and logistics. Ukraine is trying to move like an adaptive force, infiltrate when the weather allows, strike with drones, use tanks as precision tools, and keep constant surveillance over key routes. Russia tries to push with reinforcements, but roads have become traps and improvisation is paid for in fire. Meanwhile, the rear suffers daily strikes. Political news points to reforms and technological bets, and the world debates how much longer this escalation can be sustained without the conflict changing level. Friends, thank you for being here. If you want to support my work, you can do so through the channel membership, Patreon, and I'm also on Spotify with video in addition to audio. If you can't support financially, a comment and a subscription help enormously to push this content in the algorithm. I wish you a peaceful sky wherever you are. Take care, and I'll see you in the next report.